In the outer rim of human-controlled space, on a small, dusty colony called Varelia, a military training academy trained the next generation of soldiers. The academy was not glamorous. It was a fortress of steel walls, endless corridors, and firing ranges that stretched into the horizon. The students were tough, built for combat, and trained from childhood to survive the harshest conditions. Among them was a girl who seemed entirely out of place. She was small, barely reaching the height of most of her classmates, with a slight frame that made her look fragile. Her uniform often hung loosely on her shoulders, and her boots, though polished, seemed to almost swallow her feet. Despite her appearance, there was a sharpness in her eyes that no one could ignore. She watched everything quietly, listening to the loud, brash conversations of her peers and memorizing every detail of their behavior. She was the kind of person people noticed only when it was too late. And yet the students didn't notice. They saw a girl who seemed awkward, weak, and incapable of keeping up with their rigorous schedules. They laughed behind her back, mocked her clumsy attempts at strength training, and whispered that she would never survive even a week in the field. Her name was Lyra. She spoke little, moving through the academy halls silently, always observing. The instructors had started noticing her, seeing the way she moved with unusual precision and care. Her posture was perfect, her attention to detail remarkable. She might have looked ordinary, but in reality, she was studying everything around her, how the other cadets reacted under pressure, how they carried themselves in combat drills, how they handled failure. She learned without speaking, learning from mistakes, both her own and those of others. The academy's schedule was brutal. Every day began before dawn, with physical training, mental conditioning, and simulated combat exercises that pushed students to their limits. Lyra often struggled at first, not because she lacked skill, but because she didn't yet understand the raw strength her peers used effortlessly. They ran faster, lifted heavier, and endured longer without complaint. Her early days were filled with grunts of exertion, sweat dripping down her face as she tried to match them. She fell behind often, but she never gave up. Her determination was invisible to most, masked by her apparent weakness. During the first week, the mocking began. A group of students, led by a boy named Yarek, made it their mission to point out Lyra's shortcomings. If she failed to lift a weight or stumbled in a running drill, they laughed loudly. They nicknamed her Feather, joking that she was too light to fight. The other students joined in, whispering snide remarks whenever she passed. Lyra didn't react. She kept her eyes forward, her expression calm, her mind focused on observation rather than retaliation. She noticed their movements, their strengths and weaknesses, storing them away silently. Every joke, every laugh, every sneer was fuel for her understanding. The first major test was in the Academy's combat simulation arena, a massive structure filled with holographic enemies, laser traps, and shifting terrain. The students were paired in squads to complete an objective: retrieve a data core from the center of the arena while under attack. Lyra's squad was skeptical of her ability to contribute. Her teammates whispered doubts, leaving her at the rear during the initial march. But Lyra had a plan she hadn't shared. She studied the arena's layout as they moved, memorizing the positions of the traps and the most likely approaches of their holographic enemies. As the exercise began, chaos erupted. Laser traps triggered, holographic enemies appeared from all directions, and students screamed orders at each other. Lyra moved with precision, avoiding the traps that caught others off guard. She used the arena's cover to advance strategically, reaching positions that gave her squad advantage. When a teammate was about to be struck by a holographic blast, she reacted instinctively, pushing him out of harm's way and neutralizing the enemy with a well-timed strike. Her movements were fluid, almost graceful, and entirely effective. For the first time, some of her peers paused, realizing that her small frame hid a mind capable of incredible tactical thinking. Despite her performance, the mocking didn't stop immediately. The loudest voices continued to deride her, unwilling to accept that someone they considered weak could succeed. But cracks began to appear. A few of the quieter students began observing her closely, noticing patterns in her movements and decisions. Even some of the instructors whispered among themselves, intrigued by her natural aptitude. Lyra remained silent, letting her actions speak for her. Outside the training grounds, life at the academy was harsh. Meals were sparse, sleep was limited, and discipline was strict. Lyra learned quickly how to manage her energy, how to conserve strength when needed, and how to focus her mind under pressure. She developed a routine that balanced her training with observation, always seeking improvement. She started noticing things the other students missed, the way Yarek's hand twitched when he was nervous, the subtle signals that indicated a teammate was about to make a mistake, the timing of the instructor's movements during drills. Every detail was data, and every piece of data was a tool she could use. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of combat drills, Lyra stayed behind while the other students collapsed in exhaustion. She moved through the training arena, repeating maneuvers, testing different approaches, and refining her strategy. She didn't care that no one watched her. In her mind, the mockery of her peers was irrelevant. What mattered was mastery, the ability to predict, react, and outthink anyone in a combat scenario. By the time she left, the arena was littered with holographic debris and simulated enemies, neutralized efficiently by her alone. It was a silent victory, unnoticed by most, but a crucial step in her growth. As the weeks passed, her reputation began to shift subtly. The louder students still mocked her publicly, but in private, some began asking for her advice. Small groups watched her silently during exercises, trying to learn her methods. The instructors began assigning her to more complex drills, curious to see how she would handle the challenges. Lyra never sought recognition. She only sought knowledge, skill, and preparation for the battles that would inevitably come beyond the academy walls. One day, during a field exercise simulating a hostile alien encounter, the academy set up an elaborate mock battlefield. It was a test of strategy, coordination, and leadership. Each squad was assigned a sector, with objectives designed to mimic real combat scenarios. Lyra's squad was placed in a difficult position, flanked by opposing teams and with limited resources. Her teammates were anxious, looking around for guidance. Lyra spoke little, issuing calm, precise instructions. She positioned each member where their strengths could be used most effectively, using deception and movement to control the enemy's approach. By the end of the exercise, her squad had completed every objective flawlessly. Despite being in the most disadvantaged position, the result was remarkable, and the instructors took notice. Lyra's name began to circulate in hushed tones. The mocking voices still existed, but they were quieter now, replaced by curiosity and begrudging respect. Even Yarek, the loudest critic, found himself observing her with a new perspective, wondering how a girl so seemingly unremarkable could dominate exercises so completely. Lyra herself remained unchanged. She did not celebrate. She did not gloat. Her focus was always forward, always on the next challenge. By the end of the first month at the academy, a subtle transformation had occurred. Lyra was no longer just the girl everyone mocked. She had become a puzzle, a force that could not be ignored. Her peers began to see glimpses of her capability, though they did not yet understand the full extent. The instructors watched her with growing interest, recognizing a rare combination of intelligence, agility, and instinct. Lyra's reputation was no longer one of weakness, but of potential and invisible power waiting to be revealed in the quiet moments. When the academy was asleep, Lyra would often stand on the observation balcony. Looking out at the barren landscape of Varelia, she thought about the stars, the vastness of space, and the threats that humanity faced beyond the colony. She knew the academy was only the beginning. Real battles would come, ones where lives were at stake, and where strategy and courage mattered more than strength or size. She prepared herself silently for the day when her skills would be needed, not just for training exercises, but for survival against real enemies. And so, the girl they mocked continued to learn, to train, and to grow. Unseen, underestimated, and ignored by most, she quietly became a soldier unlike any other. Her story was only beginning, and the academy, with all its noise, rivalry, and mockery, had unknowingly shaped her into something that would one day be remembered across battlefields. Lyra, the small, quiet girl, was becoming a force no one could dismiss for long. The first sparks of her legendary path had already begun to glow. The days at the academy passed relentlessly. Lyra continued her silent observation, always pushing herself beyond her limits. While the other students thrived on physical strength, she thrived on strategy, timing, and understanding the smallest details that could change the outcome of a battle. The instructors began to notice a pattern. Her decisions, while unconventional, were always effective. The louder students who once mocked her constantly began to whisper doubts among themselves. Could it be possible that she wasn't just lucky? One morning, the Academy announced a team-based war simulation. The goal was to capture the central command point of a mock battlefield while under assault by other squads. The terrain was complex, filled with narrow valleys, rocky hills, and artificial obstacles designed to test both physical skill and tactical awareness. The students were divided into teams, and each team received limited resources and equipment. Lyra's squad was assigned a sector that was considered the most vulnerable, with steep cliffs on one side and open terrain on the other. Many whispered that her squad was doomed before the exercise even began. Her teammates looked at her skeptically. Some refused to even make eye contact, believing she would be of little use in a direct engagement. Lyra didn't respond to the doubt. She simply moved through the preparations calmly, assessing the terrain, measuring distances, and noting the strengths and weaknesses of her squad. She positioned herself at the rear at first, a calculated decision. She observed the environment, watching the opposing squads and noting their approaches. She noticed how some students relied on brute force, charging recklessly, while others hesitated, unsure of the correct moment to act. As the simulation began, chaos erupted. Laser blasters and simulated explosives filled the air with sound and light. And cadets shouted orders, many of them panicking under pressure. Lyra, however, moved methodically. She guided her teammates into positions where they could defend themselves while setting up ambushes against the enemy squads. When one of her teammates froze, unsure of where to fire, she quietly instructed him on the best target. And the result was immediate success. Every step Lyra took was deliberate. She avoided unnecessary risks, yet always found opportunities to turn the tide in her squad's favor. Her understanding of human behavior allowed her to predict her opponent's moves before they happened. She could see hesitation, fear, and overconfidence, and she used each of these observations to her advantage. By the middle of the exercise, it was clear that her squad was outperforming everyone else, even those with far greater physical abilities. The instructors were impressed. They whispered to one another as they watched, amazed by her leadership and tactical skill. Lyra was small and quiet, yet she commanded the battlefield with precision. Her squad responded to her guidance without hesitation, trusting her instincts even when they didn't understand them fully. This trust grew organically, a sign that her leadership was genuine and not forced. Meanwhile, her peers who had once mocked her began to realize that their previous judgments had been wrong. Yarick, the boy who had led much of the ridicule, found himself conflicted. He had always assumed that Lyra would fail, that her size and quiet nature made her incapable. But now, watching her maneuver her squad flawlessly, he felt a mix of admiration and unease. The mocking whispers had faded, replaced by a silent acknowledgement that she was different in a way that demanded respect. During the final phase of the simulation, a surprise obstacle was introduced. Holographic alien drones appeared, forcing all squads to adapt quickly. Many of the stronger students panicked, firing blindly and exposing themselves to danger. Lyra remained calm. She analyzed the drones' patterns and identified weaknesses in their approach. She directed her squad to exploit these weaknesses, creating diversions and traps that neutralized the threat efficiently. Her ability to remain calm under pressure inspired her teammates, who followed her instructions without hesitation. Even in the midst of simulated chaos, by the end of the exercise, Lyra's squad had achieved every objective, outperforming squads that had previously dismissed her. The instructors praised her quietly, noting her strategic brilliance and calm leadership. The students, who had once laughed at her, now looked at her with a mix of awe and disbelief. Lyra did not revel in their recognition. She remained composed, focused on the lessons learned and how she could improve further. After the exercise, she returned to the barracks, exhausted but undeterred. She spent hours analyzing the simulation, replaying every moment in her mind, identifying areas where she could refine her decisions. Unlike many of her peers who celebrated victory or blamed failure on others, she treated each exercise as a learning opportunity. Every success was a step toward mastery. Every mistake a lesson to be remembered. Word of her performance began to spread. A few students approached her privately asking for advice or strategies. Lyra responded with simple, precise guidance, never boasting or drawing attention to herself. Slowly, she began to earn the respect of her peers, not through intimidation or confrontation, but through quiet demonstration of skill and intelligence. Even those who had mocked her could no longer deny her talent. One evening, during a particularly quiet night at the academy, Lyra sat alone on the observation balcony, gazing at the stars above Varelia. She reflected on the day's events and considered the challenges ahead. She knew the academy was only the beginning. Real battles, the kind where lives were at stake and where mistakes could not be simulated or reversed, would come soon. She needed to prepare, not just physically, but mentally. Her small size and quiet nature were advantages in some ways, allowing her to observe without being noticed. But she knew that her true strength lay in her mind. The next week brought another challenge. A multi-day endurance exercise designed to test stamina, leadership, and decision-making under extreme conditions. Lyra's squad was pushed to the limit, forced to navigate treacherous terrain, endure minimal rest, and maintain operational effectiveness against simulated enemy forces. Her peers, many of whom had relied on physical strength alone, began to falter. Lyra, however, remained consistent. She guided her squad carefully, ensuring that they conserved energy, avoided unnecessary risks, and maintained focus. Her ability to anticipate problems and plan several steps ahead allowed her team to continue functioning while others collapsed from exhaustion or frustration. By the end of the exercise, Lyra's squad had not only survived but had completed the objectives with exceptional performance. The instructors were amazed at her leadership, noting that she had turned a group of inexperienced students into a highly effective unit. The quiet admiration of her peers grew, and whispers of her potential began to circulate throughout the academy. Even those who had once mocked her were forced to reconsider their assumptions. Despite the recognition, Lyra remained humble and focused. She knew that admiration was fleeting and that real challenges lay beyond the academy walls. Her goal was not to prove herself to her peers, but to prepare for the realities of war, where the stakes were life and death. She spent her nights studying tactics, observing the behavior of her classmates and instructors, and considering every possible scenario she might face in the future. It was during one of these late-night observation sessions that she noticed a pattern in Yark's behavior. He was confident when leading attacks, but hesitant when defending. He relied heavily on brute force and often ignored subtle cues from the environment. Lyra made a mental note. In a real battle, understanding the tendencies of both allies and enemies could mean the difference between victory and defeat. She began to integrate this observation into her strategies, refining her ability to predict actions and manipulate outcomes. As weeks turned into months, Lyra's reputation continued to grow quietly. She was no longer just the girl who struggled with physical drills. She was a strategist, a thinker, and a leader in the making. Her peers began to see her differently, some seeking her guidance, others watching her with silent curiosity. The instructors increasingly assigned her to complex exercises, testing her ability to manage situations that challenged both intellect and instinct. Lyra accepted each challenge without complaint, viewing them as steps toward mastery rather than opportunities for recognition. Then came the first true test of her leadership, a simulated crisis that mirrored the conditions of an actual alien incursion. The scenario was designed to create panic, confusion, and high-pressure decision-making. All squads were placed in chaotic conditions, with limited resources and communication breakdowns. Lyra's squad faced the toughest conditions, including ambushes and unexpected obstacles. While other squads struggled to coordinate or panicked under pressure, Lyra remained composed. She issued clear, precise instructions, positioning her squad to respond effectively to each threat. Her calm demeanor inspired confidence, and her squad followed her without hesitation. By the end of the simulation, Lyra's squad had not only completed the objectives, but had done so with exceptional efficiency. The instructors were stunned, noting that her performance was unlike anything they had seen from a student of her age and experience. The other students, witnessing her success, could no longer mock her openly. Even Yurek, who had once been her harshest critic, looked at her with a mixture of respect and astonishment. Lyra, however, did not celebrate. She quietly analyzed her actions, considering how she could improve even further. As the sun set on Varelia, casting long shadows across the academy, Lyra stood alone on the observation balcony once more. The stars shimmered above, silent witnesses to her growing skill and determination. She knew that the academy was only a preparation ground, and the real challenges awaited in the galaxy beyond. But she was ready. Each exercise, each observation, each lesson learned had prepared her for the day when she would be called upon to face real enemies, to lead under pressure, and to prove that even the quietest, smallest soldier could become the most formidable of leaders. And so, Lyra continued her journey, unnoticed by many, underestimated by most, but steadily becoming a soldier of unmatched skill, intelligence, and courage. Her story was still unfolding. The galaxy had yet to see the true power of the girl who had once been mocked and dismissed. Soon her talents would demand attention, and the enemies of humanity would come to know her not as a small, quiet girl, but as a commander who could outthink and outmaneuver any foe. The day finally came when the Academy's exercises would intersect with reality. Scouts had reported unusual activity on the outskirts of the colony's strange ships, movements too organized to be mere natural phenomena. The instructors called an emergency assembly, explaining that while this was not a direct attack, the situation would be treated as a simulation of real combat. Students would face scenarios meant to test rapid response, decision-making, and survival under pressure. Lyra listened intently, her mind already working through countless strategies and contingencies. Her peers were anxious, whispering rumors and speculating about the possibilities, but Lyra remained calm. Focusing entirely on preparation and observation, her squad was assigned a vulnerable sector once again, the same position that had been used for training exercises. The instructors intentionally placed them in a difficult situation, hoping to challenge leadership and tactical skill. Her teammates exchanged worried glances, but Lyra did not respond to their nervousness. She analyzed the terrain, noting potential ambush points, advantageous positions for defense, and routes for retreat if necessary. Every detail mattered. Every possibility was weighed. Her calm presence began to settle the fears of her squad, who began to listen to her guidance more seriously than ever before. When the exercise began, chaos erupted quickly. The scouts' warning had simulated incoming attacks with rapid, unpredictable maneuvers meant to stress every student. Other squads panicked, firing indiscriminately, running into traps, and arguing over strategy. Lyra moved methodically, directing her team into positions that leveraged both their strengths and the environment. She anticipated movements, predicting where the enemy would strike, and set her squad up to counter these attacks before they happened. As the battle simulation intensified, Lyra identified a critical opportunity. A narrow pass to the side of their sector allowed her squad to flank the approaching forces, something the instructors had not specifically taught. With careful timing, she guided her teammates silently through the pass, avoiding detection. When the moment was right, they struck from the flank, catching the simulated enemy off guard and neutralizing a major threat. The instructors watching from observation posts murmured in astonishment. Her tactical awareness and initiative had turned what could have been a catastrophic situation into a strategic advantage. Meanwhile, the other students began noticing her abilities in real time. Those who had mocked her before could no longer ignore her skill. They whispered among themselves, realizing that the small, quiet girl they had dismissed was orchestrating the success of her squad. Even Yurek, the former leader of the mocking group, was forced to acknowledge her talent in his mind, though his pride prevented him from saying it aloud. Lyra's calm and calculated approach inspired her teammates, who executed every maneuver with precision, trusting her decisions even when they seemed unconventional. As the simulated assault continued, an unexpected complication arose. A secondary force, stronger and faster than the primary attackers, emerged from a hidden sector. Many squads were unprepared, falling into disarray and panic. Lyra assessed the new threat immediately, adjusting her squad's formation to account for the increased danger. She positioned her members to protect each other, using terrain to reduce exposure and maximize effectiveness. Her quick thinking allowed them to neutralize the additional threat efficiently. The instructors noted her adaptability, realizing that she was not only brilliant in planning but also capable of improvisation under pressure. Hours passed, and the exercise escalated into a full-scale simulated war scenario. Lyra's squad faced relentless challenges, from ambushes to resource shortages, and yet they continued to perform with remarkable coordination. She guided them through each obstacle with patience and precision, never raising her voice unnecessarily, but always ensuring that each command was clear and effective. Her ability to read the battlefield, anticipate enemy actions, and direct her squad with quiet authority became increasingly evident to all observers. The instructors finally called a pause to assess the situation. Lyra's squad had not only survived the simulated assault, but had achieved every objective with exceptional efficiency. The other squads, by contrast, had suffered disorganization, mistakes, and losses due to panic and poor leadership. The instructors discussed her performance in hushed tones, impressed by her combination of strategic brilliance, composure under pressure, and natural leadership skills. It was clear that Lyra had elevated her squad from mere participants in a simulation to a highly effective unit. Word of her performance spread quickly among the cadets. Those who had once mocked her were now hesitant to speak ill, some even seeking her advice on tactics and strategy. Lyra continued to respond quietly, never boasting, never seeking personal recognition. Her focus remained on the lessons learned, on understanding her team, and on preparing for the inevitable real challenges that would come. The shift in perception was subtle but significant. She was no longer just the girl they mocked, but a respected strategist, someone whose mind and instincts were difficult to ignore. As the Academy's day drew to a close, the instructors announced a debriefing session. Students gathered in the central hall, exhausted and tense, waiting to hear feedback. The instructors spoke of the importance of leadership, teamwork, and adaptability, highlighting examples from various squads. When they mentioned Lyra's squad, the tone shifted from casual observation to genuine acknowledgement. They praised her calm, precise, and innovative decisions, emphasizing how her leadership had enabled her team to outperform even the most experienced cadets. Lyra listened quietly, taking note of every observation, every comment, and every critique. While others basked in the praise or argued over minor points, she focused on what could be improved. She considered alternate strategies, different formations, and ways to further enhance her squad's efficiency. Her analytical mind never rested. Even in moments of recognition, she sought growth and improvement. Later, back in the barracks, her squad gathered around to discuss the day's events. They were more open to her now, asking questions, sharing insights, and seeking her perspective. Lyra guided them patiently, explaining her thought process and decision-making without arrogance. She encouraged them to think critically, to anticipate challenges, and to trust in both their abilities and the team's coordination. By the end of the discussion, her squad had grown not just in skill, but in confidence and cohesion. That night, as the academy settled into quiet, Lyra returned to the observation balcony. The stars above Varelia stretched endlessly, a reminder of the vastness of space and the dangers that lay beyond the colony. She thought about the day's exercises, about the decisions she had made, and about the lessons she had learned. She reflected on the transformation happening among her peers, the shift from mockery to respect, from doubt to recognition. Yet she remained grounded, knowing that the true test of her abilities would not be simulations or praise but real battles, where every decision could mean the difference between survival and death. The following morning brought new challenges. Scouts reported increased movement in the sector bordering the colony, and the instructors announced a surprise full-scale combat drill. This exercise was designed to mimic a genuine invasion, testing students under conditions of stress, uncertainty, and high stakes. Lyra's squad was once again placed in the most vulnerable position, facing overwhelming odds. Many students expressed fear, whispering that the odds were impossible. But Lyra assessed the situation calmly, identifying both threats and opportunities. She organized her squad methodically, assigning roles based on each member's strengths, and devising a plan that leveraged terrain, timing, and strategy. As the simulated invasion began, other squads fell into disarray. Panic spread among those unprepared for the intensity of the exercise. Lyra's squad, by contrast, executed their plan flawlessly. They anticipated enemy movements, set ambushes, and adjusted to unexpected obstacles with precision. The instructors observing the exercise were astonished by the squad's coordination and efficiency. Noting that Lyra's calm and insightful leadership had transformed them into a formidable unit. By mid-exercise, the simulated attackers began to falter. Unable to break through the defenses and counter-strategies orchestrated by Lyra, her squad moved with confidence, executing each maneuver seamlessly. Observers whispered about the remarkable transformation of the girl who had once been mocked, now commanding a squad that could outthink and outmaneuver even the most skilled opponents. Lyra's presence was subtle, yet undeniable. She did not dominate with force, but with intellect, foresight, and quiet authority. Her squad trusted her implicitly, following her lead without hesitation or doubt. As the exercise concluded, instructors and cadets alike were left in awe. Lyra's squad had achieved objectives that others could not, neutralizing the simulated threat efficiently and without unnecessary risk. The mocking whispers of her peers were gone, replaced by cautious respect and curiosity. Even Yarick, still wrestling with his pride, could not deny her abilities. The Academy had witnessed the emergence of a leader unlike any they had trained before, strategist who combined intellect, composure, and human instinct to achieve extraordinary results. That evening, Lyra stood once more on the observation balcony. Looking out over the rugged landscape of Varelia, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She reflected on the events of the day, on the growth of her squad, and on her own progress. She knew that the Academy was only a preparation ground, a place to refine skills and test abilities. The true challenges lay in the galaxy beyond, where real threats would test every lesson, every strategy, and every instinct she had honed. Her story, once defined by mockery and doubt, was beginning to change. Lyra was no longer merely the girl they underestimated. She was becoming a soldier, a leader, a strategist, a force that even her peers could not ignore. And in the quiet of the night, under the endless stars, she silently prepared for the day when her true test would come, knowing that she would face it with the same calm precision and courage that had guided her every step at the Academy. The morning on Varelia dawned cold and quiet, but tension hung in the air like a heavy fog. Scouts had confirmed that the strange movements detected near the colony were not drills. They were preparing for a real invasion. The instructors called the Academy into emergency readiness. Students were instructed to prepare for an immediate simulated response. Though the seriousness of the situation made it feel real, Lyra moved calmly among her squad, issuing instructions, assessing supplies, and reviewing terrain for tactical advantages. Her focus was unshakable, and her composed demeanor began to instill confidence in her peers. When the simulation began, it quickly escalated into a full-scale assault. The enemy forces, controlled by instructors, advanced with speed and aggression, forcing students to respond without hesitation. Many squads fell into panic, shouting and retreating at the slightest provocation. Lyra's squad, however, executed every maneuver with discipline and precision. She directed them to hold strategic positions, counteract advances, and set traps for approaching forces. Her insight into human behavior allowed her to anticipate enemy movements, exploiting hesitation and overconfidence among the opposing cadets. As the battle intensified, Lyra noticed a critical flaw in the enemy's approach. Their flanks were exposed, and if she could redirect her squad quickly, they could encircle the attackers. She made her decision instantly, signaling her team to shift positions. The squad moved fluidly, responding to each command without hesitation. When the flanking maneuver succeeded, the simulated enemy found themselves trapped, unable to continue their advance. Lyra's strategic thinking had turned the tide, demonstrating the effectiveness of careful observation, rapid analysis, and decisive action. Observers in the command tower murmured in amazement. Lyra, the girl once mocked for her small size and quiet nature, was leading a squad with the precision of a seasoned commander. Her actions were deliberate and intelligent, every move designed to maximize advantage while minimizing risk. The instructors exchanged impressed glances, recognizing that her combination of tactical insight, composure under pressure, and leadership was exceptional. Even for someone still in training, meanwhile, the other students began to notice. Those who had previously mocked her now watched in silent awe. Even Yarek, the boy who had led the ridicule, could not conceal his astonishment. Lyra's influence over her squad was undeniable. They moved as a cohesive unit, executing maneuvers that others struggled to coordinate. Her quiet leadership contrasted sharply with the chaos around them, proving that strength was not always measured in muscle or firepower but in intellect, timing, and control. During a critical phase of the exercise, a surprise complication arose. A second simulated force appeared, faster and more aggressive than the first, testing the squad's ability to adapt under pressure. Many teams faltered, unable to respond effectively to the new threat. Lyra, however, analyzed the situation instantly. She repositioned her squad, creating defensive lines, deploying counterattacks, and predicting the enemy's moves before they occurred. Her team responded with precision, executing her orders seamlessly. The instructors were stunned. It was clear that Lyra was not only capable of strategic planning, but could also improvise under the most intense pressure. Hours passed in continuous engagement. Lyra's squad faced waves of simulated assaults, resource shortages, and environmental challenges. Yet they remained coordinated and effective. Every time an unexpected obstacle arose, Lyra's mind processed it instantly, identifying opportunities and solutions. Her teammates followed her guidance without question, trusting in her decisions even when they defied conventional expectations. Their cohesion, built under her leadership, allowed them to outperform squads with greater numbers and physical strength. By the end of the exercise, Lyra's squad had achieved every objective. The instructors were impressed beyond measure, noting that her performance exceeded expectations for students of her age and experience. Observers remarked on her ability to remain calm under pressure, to anticipate the actions of both her squad and the enemy, and to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances with strategic precision. Lyra's reputation among both instructors and students shifted dramatically. She was no longer the mocked girl, but a rising star in the academy, a leader whose talents could not be ignored. Even the students who had doubted her abilities began seeking her advice in private. They asked about her strategies, her decision-making process, and her methods for maintaining calm under pressure. Lyra responded quietly, guiding them with patience and clarity, never boasting, never seeking attention. Her humility and focus further endeared her to her squad and slowly won the respect of her peers. The mocking whispers that had followed her for weeks were replaced by a cautious acknowledgement of her skill and potential. Late that night, Lyra sat alone on the observation balcony. Gazing at the stars that stretched endlessly over Veralia, she reflected on the day's events, the strategies employed, the challenges overcome, and the lessons learned. The Academy had provided her with knowledge, training, and simulated experience. But she knew the real challenges lay beyond the safety of its walls. Real enemies, real stakes, and real danger awaited. She allowed herself a moment of quiet determination, silently preparing for the battles to come. The next morning, the situation escalated further. Scouts reported that the activity outside the colony had intensified. Instructors decided to simulate a complete invasion scenario, combining elements of surprise, overwhelming force, and complex objectives. Lyra's squad was once again placed in the most vulnerable sector. Her teammates expressed fear and doubt, whispering that they could not survive such a scenario. Lyra analyzed the terrain, the squad's strengths, and the enemy's approach. She devised a plan that balanced offense and defense, leveraging timing, positioning, and strategy. When the exercise commenced, chaos erupted instantly. Other squads struggled to coordinate, many falling into confusion and panic. Lyra's squad moved with precision, executing the plan flawlessly. She directed her teammates to hold strategic points, counter enemy advances, and employ deception when necessary. Her ability to read the battlefield, predict movements, and adapt to unexpected developments became evident with every maneuver. The instructors watched in awe as the small, quiet girl directed her squad with the skill of a seasoned commander. During the heat of the simulation, a moment of true opportunity presented itself. A key flank of the enemy was exposed, and if Lyra acted swiftly, she could turn the tide decisively. She signaled her squad, executing a calculated maneuver that caught the opposing forces off guard. The move succeeded perfectly, demonstrating not only her tactical brilliance, but also her ability to make rapid, takes decisions under extreme pressure. Her squad followed her lead instinctively, achieving a level of coordination that left observers astonished. By the conclusion of the exercise, Lyra's squad had not only survived, but dominated the scenario. Every objective had been completed, every challenge met with precision and strategy. The instructors convened to discuss the results. Noting the exceptional performance of her team and the extraordinary leadership demonstrated by Lyra, students who had once mocked her were now visibly impressed, their respect evident in subtle gestures and hushed conversations. Even Yarick, whose pride had prevented him from openly acknowledging her skill, could not hide his recognition of her talent. In the aftermath of the exercise, Lyra gathered her squad for a debriefing. She guided them through a discussion of tactics, analyzing every move, every decision, and every outcome. Her focus was not on praise, but on learning and growth. She encouraged her teammates to think critically, anticipate challenges, and trust in both their abilities and the cohesion of the squad. By the end of the session, her team had grown stronger, more confident, and better prepared for future challenges. That night, Lyra returned to the observation balcony. The sky was clear, the stars shining with cold brilliance over the barren terrain. She reflected on the transformation of her squad, the shift in perception among her peers, and her own growth as a strategist and leader. The academy had tested her abilities, shaped her skills, and revealed her potential. But the real test lay ahead beyond the walls of training grounds. In the uncertain expanse of space where real threats would challenge everything she had learned, Lyra's story, once marked by ridicule and doubt, was now defined by respect, strategy, and growing influence. She was no longer just a girl the others mocked. She had become a leader in thought and action, a strategist whose talents commanded attention. In the quiet of the night, under the vast expanse of stars, she silently prepared for the day when her skills would be tested, not in simulations, but in real battles where lives depended on every decision. Her journey was far from over, but with each exercise, each observation, and each challenge overcome, she moved closer to becoming the legendary commander the galaxy would one day remember. The day dawned with a sharp chill, carrying a sense of urgency that no one at the academy could ignore. Scouts had confirmed that hostile forces were approaching Varelia faster than anyone expected. While the academy had trained students for months, this was no longer a simulation, it was a warning, a chance to test what they had learned under real stakes. Lyra moved among her squad with the calm assurance that had come to define her. She assessed terrain, checked equipment, and ran mental simulations of possible outcomes. Her small frame belied the intensity of her mind, which was already calculating the best way to respond to the approaching threat. The instructors called an emergency assembly to brief the students on the evolving situation. They emphasized that this would still be a controlled exercise, but but the objectives were modeled closely after what a real invasion might look like. Many students whispered nervously, and some visibly panicked at the thought of facing an overwhelming enemy force. Lyra, however, remained focused. Her mind analyzed every variable: squad strength, enemy behavior patterns, environmental advantages, and potential risks. She considered not only the immediate threat, but also the longer-term survival of her team. Her squad was once again assigned to the most vulnerable sector, a position that most others would have considered a trap. Her teammates exchanged anxious glances, their confidence shaken by the reports of enemy forces. Lyra calmly issued instructions, positioning her squad for maximum advantage. She emphasized communication, timing, and observation, preparing them to respond to unexpected developments. Her quiet authority began to replace their fear with trust. They moved as a unit, relying on her strategic direction and instinctive understanding of human behavior. The exercise began. The instructors released the simulated enemy forces into the sector with relentless speed. Cadets outside Lyra's squad struggled immediately, some panicking and running into traps, others firing blindly without coordination. Lyra's team moved with precision, holding defensive positions, countering attacks, and exploiting weaknesses in the enemy formation. Her calm, deliberate instructions allowed her squad to maintain cohesion. Even as the battlefield became chaotic and unpredictable, during the initial phase of the assault, Lyra identified an opportunity to shift from defense to offense. A key flank of the simulated enemy was overextended, leaving them vulnerable. She signaled her squad to move carefully into position, using terrain as cover and timing their advance for maximum effect. When the maneuver succeeded, her squad effectively trapped a significant portion of the enemy, reducing the threat while conserving their own strength. The instructors observing the exercise whispered among themselves, impressed by the sophistication of her decision-making and the flawless execution by her team. As the simulated invasion continued, further complications were introduced. Additional enemy forces appeared from unexpected angles, testing adaptability and resilience. Many cadets struggled to respond, becoming disorganized and hesitant. Lyra's squad, however, adapted quickly. She adjusted formations, reassigned roles, and anticipated the enemy's likely next moves. Her instructions were concise and effective, guiding her team through challenges with seamless coordination. Her ability to read the battlefield, predict outcomes, and act decisively under pressure became increasingly apparent to all observers. Hours passed with continuous engagement. Lyra's squad faced waves of simulated threats, environmental hazards, and resource limitations. Each time a new challenge arose, Lyra analyzed it instantly, calculating the best response. Her small, quiet presence on the battlefield contrasted sharply with the chaos around them. Her team followed her lead instinctively, trusting her judgment and strategic insight completely. Their cohesion and effectiveness grew with each obstacle, demonstrating the transformative impact of her leadership. By the midpoint of the exercise, Lyra recognized a critical moment. The simulated enemy's command unit, responsible for coordinating attacks, was exposed. She realized that neutralizing this unit could turn the tide decisively. She devised a bold plan, a coordinated strike using her squad to create a diversion, while a smaller team moved to disrupt the command center. Her execution was precise, and the maneuver succeeded perfectly. The instructors noted the brilliance of her decision, highlighting her ability to combine tactical thinking with timing and psychological insight. The other students, who had once mocked her, now watched with awe and growing respect. They whispered among themselves, acknowledging that Lyra's intelligence, composure, strategic acumen had transformed the outcome of the exercise. Even Yurek, previously a harsh critic, could not deny her capabilities. Her calm leadership, clear thinking, and foresight had elevated her squad above all others. They had gone from being underestimated to dominating the field, all under her quiet command. The final phase of the exercise tested endurance, decision-making under extreme pressure, and adaptability to rapidly changing circumstances. Lyra's squad faced multiple simultaneous threats, requiring split-second decisions. She assessed every scenario, prioritizing objectives and guiding her team with concise, clear commands. Each decision was calculated to maximize efficiency and minimize risk. Her squad responded flawlessly, demonstrating the strength of her leadership and the trust she had cultivated among them. By the conclusion of the exercise, Lyra's squad had completed every objective with exceptional skill. The instructors convened to review the outcomes, noting that her performance had far exceeded expectations for students at her level of experience. Her ability to lead under pressure, think strategically, and adapt to unforeseen challenges had set her apart as a remarkable talent. Students who had previously doubted her abilities now sought her guidance and advice, recognizing the value of her insight and experience in the debriefing. The instructors praised her leadership and tactical brilliance. They highlighted specific maneuvers and decisions that had turned potential disasters into victories, emphasizing her ability to maintain composure under extreme conditions. Her squad's effectiveness and cohesion were attributed directly to her calm authority, precise planning, and instinctive understanding of human behavior. The transformation in perception among her peers was complete. She was no longer the girl who had been mocked. She was a respected strategist, a leader whose capabilities were undeniable. That evening, Lyra returned to the observation balcony, looking out over the vast, rugged landscape of Varelia. The stars shimmered above, a reminder of the infinite challenges and opportunities that lay beyond the colony. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the girl mocked for her size and quiet nature to a respected leader and strategist. Each challenge, each exercise, and each observation had contributed to her growth. She had learned to turn doubt and ridicule into motivation, transforming what others perceived as weaknesses into strengths. As she gazed at the stars, Lyra considered the future. The Academy had prepared her for simulated threats, but the real dangers were out there in the galaxy. She knew that when the time